Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Healing Beyond Narcissism. This is a channel that I have dedicated, or I am dedicating this channel to talk about narcissism in general, which I have unfortunately went through narcissistic abuse for over 15 years. And I have learned a lot, even though it was a painful experience. Is an experience that have allowed me to learn a lot about myself, about things I need to heal in my own life from traumatic experiences I have went through before that marriage. And so the I would say that marriage specifically have taught me a lot, and it has also allowed me to see myself in the sense that there are certain things I needed to work on myself. Now, it was very hard to find resources that could actually combine a lot of the information I needed during my healing journey to be able to help me even understand what narcissism was to begin with. So, because it was so hard to find information online or in any other resources, really, that is like I would say one compile place, one compile location to be able to just see that information and apply it and use it as needed. And so I decided to make this channel because I have not only my own experience, I have encountered several individuals, unfortunately, who went through similar experiences as I went through, or are still currently, unfortunately, in those same situations because it's so hard to exit. It's so hard for them to exit. So therefore, I decided to make this channel to help to provide certain information that I have learned myself during that experience, and to be able to use that knowledge for awareness. It's mostly really for awareness. I'm using this channel for awareness because if we are aware of what narcissism looks like, what narcissism is, we will be less likely to actually be, I would not say a victim, but mostly I would say go through such an experience if we know exactly what it looks like, right? And what are the telltale signs. So we will not allow ourselves to embark in such a traumatic experience knowing that we already know and know the signs. So that's the reason I am creating this channel. That's the reason um, I decided to create this content. So I'll just go ahead and go over the definition of narcissism. Now, when we talk about narcissism, we are more likely to see it as, oh, they're just so selfish, or they're just really gaslighting me, oh, they're doing this, they're doing that. We associate it with one or two things. Right? We don't really associate it with actually a disorder. It's a mental disorder, unfortunately. Even though we do not associate it the same as depression or anxiety or PTSD. We don't. What we see it more like, oh, it's just something that they do just to antagonize people. But, they just do that, right? We don't see it as it's actually a disorder. Not only people who are narcissists, they know what they're doing, but they know exactly how to hide what they're doing. That's the problem, right? But I would just focus mostly on the knowing what it is, what it looks like. And I will use my own personal experiences to provide some of the examples of things that I have seen, that I went through over more than 15 years. I have seen so many different versions of the same person that at some point I had to ask myself, like, wow, that's how is that even possible? But it is possible within the same person who is narcissist to be able to portray so many different things, so many different, I guess, aspects of the narcissist, their 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 disorder, right? That you will not be able to even. That's how we end up actually losing ourselves in those relationships, because it's almost like a shape shifting. We see them shape shift literally in front of us on a day-to-day basis. And what we see tomorrow might not be the same the day after, and so on. It's a character. The biggest characteristics of a narcissist is the ability to shape shift using different techniques, right? That's the biggest thing. So again, narcissism is a personality disorder. It is a personality disorder. It's a psychiatric disorder. So we have to be mindful of that. But it's a functional psychiatric disorder. It's a disorder that people who have it can function on a day-to-day basis, can actually be more functional than people who actually don't have it, because they know so well how to camouflage. They know so well how to trick people and the environment they live in, that most people, they go undetected. People who have narcissistic personality disorder, they are very, very undetected, unless we know the telltale sign and we have an eye for detail and we have an eye to see patterns. And even when we have the eye to see patterns, sometimes those patterns will change over time. So we have to be mindful to be able to not only see the pattern, but to also clock when those patterns are changing, right? So that's narcissistic personality disorder. The same way we talk about bipolar disorder, the same way we talk about borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder is a real thing. But the only thing again is they're very functional in society. We find narcissists in any walks of life. We find narcissists in our own homes, our own children, our own parents, our own friends, our own co-workers. We find our own, any and everyone we can imagine can be a narcissist. But again, we would not know that they are a narcissist unless we know the telltale signs. We can be married to somebody for 50 years, 60 years. We would not know, because the biggest thing for narcissism or individuals with narcissistic personality disorder is that they understand human emotions so well. They understand human emotions so well that they use those emotions to benefit them by manipulating, by gaslighting, by using, by future faking, by doing so many different things, right? That we will never get out of that situation if we do not know that actually where we are is very unhealthy. Because the whole point is to rewire our mindset, to rewire our brains, to trick us, to live into a parallel reality, to live in a completely different reality than what we came in, the reality we had when we entered that relationship or that situation. That's the biggest thing. So we have to be mindful of that. So in that sense, narcissistic personality disorder is not just something that we usually on a day-to-day basis we say, oh, he's a narcissist or she's a narcissist. But a narcissistic personality disorder is a real disorder. It's not something that just like we say, oh, he's selfish, right? It's not an adjective. It's not an adjective. It's not, oh, he's so cold or he's so detached or it's not really an adjective. It's a real disorder. Again, when we don't know that it's a real disorder, we would not be able to know what to do to begin with and how to actually make sure that we exit that situation. Because narcissistic personality disorder is not really a disorder that can be easily, it's not a disorder that can be treated really. Because the biggest thing is people with narcissistic disorder, they do not see themselves as being the problem. I'm not the problem. And one of the biggest things they do again is to confuse people. That's the hallmark of narcissism, is confusion. That's the hallmark of narcissism, is to confuse you, is to confuse us, is to make us leave our own reality, is for us to actually believe something completely different than what we believed before we came into contact with that narcissist. That's the biggest thing. The hallmark of narcissism is to bring confusion. Once we see that we're with someone in a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, we start seeing that we were more confused than one before we started that relationship. We need to ask ourselves, why am I confused? Why am I confused? This is not normal. And that's when we need to investigate to see, is this person narcissist? Right? And so I'll go ahead and talk about narcissist. That's the definition of narcissist. That's just a few things we have to be mindful of. Confusion. That's the number one thing, confusion. Now, there is narcissistic traits. Narcissistic traits are not the same as being a narcissist, because narcissistic traits are just traits. They're things that actually we can change over time. We can work on them, right? It's operating in a way almost that a narcissist operates, but not in a core. We're not, our core is not narcissist. Narcissists have core behaviors that define the fact that they have narcissistic personality disorder. When we have narcissistic traits, it's not a core behavior. There's a difference between a behavior and a trait. A trait is something that we do once in a while, right? A behavior is something that we do consistently. We do not know how to do something else besides that. We consistently do the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over. So it becomes second nature. It becomes second nature. Right? A trait, almost like shoes. Shoes, we wear shoes today. We can wear gym shoes today and take them off, or wear gym shoes the whole week and take them off, and then wear sandals maybe for a couple of days and then take them off, right? So think about it that way. Traits are almost like shoes, right? The traits, you can take them on and off. They're there, but they're not really there to stay. If we don't want them to stay, we can work on them, right? Behavior is something, it's almost like saying, I'm just going to go ahead and stop sleeping tonight. And I'm not going to sleep tomorrow. And I'm not going to sleep the day after. I'm not going to sleep the day after that, and so on. Now, there will be a point where we're going to break, right? We'll have a mental breakdown if we don't sleep for 7 days, for 10 days, even for 3-4 days if we don't sleep. We don't sleep for 72 hours. We don't sleep for 48 hours. 48 hours, that's doable. 72 hours, and so on. We'll have a mental breakdown because our body will not be able to actually sustain not sleeping that long. The narcissistic personality disorder is the same thing. They do not know how to stop not behaving that way. Because first of all, they don't even see themselves as a problem. Therefore, they would not know how can you resolve a problem that you don't even know that problem exists to begin with? That's the problem with narcissistic personality disorder. So when we understand that, the solution is not to stay and try to resolve it and go to marriage counseling and try to help and da da da. No, we help ourselves by finding ways to exit. Because the longer we stay in a narcissistic relationship, a narcissistic marriage, a narcissistic partnership, the longer, the more damage we end up having over time. And most of the damage is mental, unfortunately. And then eventually the mental damage will end up becoming physiological damage because of the stress, the anxiety will end up trickling down to our physiological functions. And we end up having hypertension. We end up having high blood, well, all the things like high cholesterol, high anxiety that can manifest as panic attacks, right? And we end up having all the health issues, clots. We can have clots because anything that can actually manifest in a high stress situation can manifest once we are in a relationship with a narcissist. Because the whole thing is that it's a mental disturbance. It's a relationship that mostly bring confusion. Confusion becomes mental disturbance. Mental disturbance can bring high level of stress. High level of stress can bring physiological damages, and sometimes we do not even know where they're coming from. But they're not coming from thin air. They're coming from literally having to be with that person who is mentally abusing us. So we have to be mindful. All right. So again, narcissistic personality disorder, it comes in a spectrum. And I'll talk about in the next video, I'll talk about the spectrum and I'll talk about the different types. All right. Until next time, please, please, please use this information as needed. I hope it helps. If it doesn't help, that's okay too. Okay. Until then, take care of yourself. Bye bye.